The American dream has become a nightmare. Signs of the time are on cardboard on corners in town. Like a cancer that's silently spreading, there's an unspoken fear. We're on our way down. We must take America back, Main Street to Wall Street, cities and states, Washington, D.C. Before it's too late, there's not long. We need leaders who lead us, not stick us and bleed us, then ransom our future and our children's, that's wrong. We must take America back as liberty weeps, our forefathers spin in their graves. Pray God will bless some way out of this mess. We must take America back.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the National Intel Report. I'm your host, John Statmiller. On this Wednesday, folks, it's already the 2nd of December, 2009, and that's for the feds, just in case today we commit a hate crime. My guest today, and I'm very pleased to have this gentleman, ex-Congressman James Anthony Trafficant, Jr., to be more exact. He's had a history in Washington, D.C. of not going along to get along. In other words, the good old boys there, he ran counter to a lot of their wishes. And many times he backed Republicans on certain issues that he considered to be worthwhile. He was refused committee appointment and basically banished. Well, C-SPAN didn't have a problem with James Trafficant because his fiery one-minute speeches from a well of Congress, that's what they tuned in to C-SPAN to kick the day off, was Jim Trafficant and his patented beam me up. Mr. Trafficant, how you doing, sir?
Good, John. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I don't know if you remember, you and I did an interview about 10, 11 years ago, and I can remember your congressional aide saying that you could only spend 10 or 15 minutes. You spent the entire hour with us, and at the end of the program, you said, you know what, you know more about the functioning of this government or how it's supposed to work than many people up on the Hill have.
Well, I think I do remember that, and you and there are others like you who probably know a hell of a lot more than what's going on in Washington right now. It's really a mess, John. The country's in big trouble.
Things have changed. Now, let's digress here for a few minutes, Jim. You were just released from custody. You were on a 7-year vacation, thanks to taxpayers' money. For stuff that you didn't do. You were released September 2nd of this year. By the way, I waited with bated breath. I think your first interview was with Greta Van Susteren.
Yeah.
And she looked a little, during that interview, she looked a little taken aback. She didn't quite know what to expect from you. But I watched the entire interview, and I think it came off rather well. And there was some information in there that you put out that astonished me. One thing in particular, I was always under the assumption that we only gave Israel $3 billion a year, and you earmarked it somewhere between $15 and $20 billion a year.
Yes, you see, that $3 billion, John, is only the foreign aid bill. There are 13 bills, and that's just foreign aid money. And they don't really publicize the loans that are made to Israel, the loans that are then converted to grants, the economic assistance, the military assistance, the trade compacts. I was on the Today Show, Bryant Gumbel, when I was over there back before I brought Deminiuk home the first time from Israel, and I did a live interview on the Today Show, and I told the same thing to Brian. He says, well, they only get $3 billion. I said, $3 billion, Brian, is $5,000 for every man, woman, and child in Israel from the American taxpayers every year, and that's just one bill.
Hold on one
second.
We've got a break, Jim. We'll be right back.
Get ready for Real Talk Radio. You're listening to the National Intel Report with your host, John Stadtmiller.
You know, here was a man that was once thrown in the hole for speaking up to the guards in prison, saying, hey, speak up, they can't hear you. Jim, let's go through just briefly here what led up to you being charged and thrown in prison. I know
number one, John, I was the number one target of the Justice Department since 1983. People that may not know my history, I'm the only American in the history of the United States to defeat the Justice Department in a RICO trial, full jury verdict, pro se without being an attorney. And they just couldn't live with it since 1983. It was a celebrated trial. It was the only defeat they ever had. So they tried to get me in front of grand jury 4 or 5 times. But then I brought John Deminick home, and no one would even look into it because the case was so sensitive. And I proved through my Freedom of Information Act that I got all the evidence that proved he was innocent. Now imagine, here's a man convicted and sentenced to death that I brought home. So you could imagine that the documents I got were that compelling. And they came from the Justice Department, and no one was ever tried for what they did to that man. Now he's over there fighting for his life, and there's a possibility I could be subpoenaed over there. And if they subpoena me, I'll go and help him again. But the bottom line is, when I went to prison here now, since then, 5 of the 9 people testified against me have admitted that they were pressured to lie. They had no tapes, no evidence with a 6-year investigation. Even the Secret Service agents come out now and said it was a setup. They had to get rid of Trafficant. And I think I'm going to get a lot of money out of it before it's over. There's now a young man in Nigeria, John, that was deported and said the only reason his life was ruined and he was bankrupted was because he wouldn't perjure himself and lie in the Trafficant trial. So now the prosecutor's working for an insurance company and everybody's hiding. And the main thing, though, is they said in trial that they made a 6-year investigation, $15 million, over 200 agents, all about the time of the trade Twin Towers being struck and the Pentagon being struck. But they said they made no tapes on me, John. They didn't bug my telephone or nothing. Now this is what's their Achilles heel. There's government agents come out and said they made boxes of tapes. They lied. And that the reason they had to say they had no tapes is Trafficant could have subpoenaed the tapes, and they were all exculpatory. So look, they got a real pain in the asset with me. But here I am right now. I don't know what I'm going to do, whether I'm going to run back. No one's ever won a seat coming out of prison, and I've had the longest prison sentence now in the history of the country. But I will say this. I have a strong following. I have a strong national following, which surprised me. And I have a lot of people around the country that are urging me to come out as an independent for president. And I'm laughing a little bit about it, but they're more or less comparing me a little bit with Mandela's experience, and they like my politics. And they get a chance before the day's over, I'll tell you some of the things I did and what I think has to be done, because the country is going to implode, John. It's going to implode. It's going to fall apart.
Well, and going back earlier in your career here, in Ohio, you were once jailed for 3 days because you refused, as a county sheriff, to throw people out of their houses, and these were displaced workers because the steel industry just kind of fell apart there in your district. And you were outspent by your opponent your first time around going into Congress. What is it, 7-8 to 1?
More than that.
And you were voted in how many times?
I was voted in 9 times, and that one time was the leading vote getter in the entire 435, with an opponent, by the way. But, you know, let me just tell you what's amazing about all this is that, you see, when I went to Congress, I passed some legislation that now helps homeowners from losing their homes. But I also changed it in the tax reform bill of 1998. I changed the burden of proof in a civil tax case. Before, you used to be guilty and have to prove yourself innocent. John, since that change, wage garnishments dropped from $3.1 million to $500,000 a year. Property liens dropped from $670,000 a year to $160,000 a year. But individual family-owned homes being seized by the IRS fell from 10,070 average a year to 57 homes in 50 states. Now the Democrats want to change it back. But you see,